Congratulations, boxing. Boxing is relevant again, finally, in 2024, leading into 2025. But we haven't had this kind of excitement around the boxing world in a very long time. And I do have to ask, is Jake Paul going to follow up on the momentum that he did with him and Tyson into the Netflix, into 2025, and into the future, saving what was once thought a pastime, was once thought the golden era of Mike Tyson? The last time boxing was in a major world, not including the Mayweather and the modern stuff, but the golden era. Mike Tyson came back to put boxing back on the map in 2024. Hopefully, Logan Paul can take this passing of the torch and move ahead in his promotion, ahead in his partnerships, ahead in his streaming service with Netflix, booking more fights. But what this did tonight, this didn't just gain people with a hook of Tyson coming out of retirement. This gave us a preview of fighters to watch in the future and a reason to tag in to this industry a little bit more once in a while, especially if Netflix wants to continue holding live events. I'm your host, Bryan, the Hype, Ballard, back at it again, and this is the 2025 edition of Jake Paul versus Tyson, Results and Thoughts. This occurred on November 16, 2024 in Dallas Cowboys Stadium in Texas. And our commentators on the evening did an amazing job. We got Mauro Ranallo, the voice of Fight, back in and at it in the action. From WWE fame, also from Pride Fighting days and previous boxing days. Mauro is always a great voice to listen. Rosie Perez and Roy Jones Jr. end up giving analysis along the way throughout the evening. We'll go through all the ups and downs. Let's get in. And we'll start out with the low point of the night, the very first fight. Goyette versus Nunes. Not a lot going on in this fight. It was a very, very slow opening. AT&T Stadium wasn't really packed at this moment either, and you could tell, but it was also the action in the ring was very low key. Goyette 19-4-2 is his record with 8 KOs. Nunes 0-2. Nunes has never won a fight, and he's 0-2, and they gave him the opening match of this stream. I will say, it's the first ever time I've seen in a boxing where Mauro Ranallo was trying to promote with some highlights in the entry, and he was talking about how Nunes has 150 million followers on all kinds of the social media world. But for me, I'm like, okay, that tells me they wanted him to help promote this card, and he wants to be a boxer, and he's hoping to get on the card. So why not? It's the pre-show. Nobody's going to really be watching, but we did. And this was the part where Netflix chose to stream very well and not quite cut out, unfortunately. The fight was in hand early for Goyette, who had a big skill advantage. Goyette landed 171 of 481 punches. That's 36%. And Nunes 87 of 365. 24% of his punches landed. The only thing left to question is whether Goyette could excite the crowd at all with a knockout. It didn't happen. It went further and further and further, all the way to a split decision. Ultimately ending with Goyette getting the win over his opponent. Not a lot going on back and forth in this one. And as we get the overall gladly to the next match, as you can see a couple entries here. We go to the next match. We did get a welterweight matchup. And this is my second best fight of the night. Stay tuned to see who was number one. But Mario Barrios versus Abel Ramos for the WBC title. Great way to follow up. I like this match a lot. Barrios held onto his WBC welterweight title, battling Ramos to a split draw. Barrios 29-2-1 with 18 KOs coming into this. Off to a strong start as he floored in round two. Ramos knocking him straight down, but he's saved by the bell. Ultimately, he crushed him with a straight right hand and sent him right to the canvas. Also in the sixth round, it was a close battle. Ramos came on late, very strong, trying to make up those pre-round points, but it wasn't quite enough. I want to say Ramos actually had a better pairing with Barrios in the initially trying to turn the tide of the fight, but it just wasn't there. Ramos hit 114 and 112, and it had for Barrios with a wide score of 116 to 110, and the third judge had it at 113. So it can tell you this is a very, very tight contested bout. Round 6, Ramos landed 101 to 44, and he got too comfortable and found himself climbing off the canvas when Ramos was hitting him hard. Ultimately, it was a back-and-forth battle. Barrios landed 279 of his 789 punches, and Ramos 204 of 753. You can guess how this went. It wasn't quite enough for Ramos, but Barrios remains your WBC champion in what I felt was like the second best match of the night, but not quite number one. That honor goes to our female competitors. Super light heavyweight champion and multiple other champions, Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano for the IBF, WBA, WBC, and WBO for life titles. Katie Taylor retained her undisputed women's lightweight championship in a controversial, very, very controversial decision tonight. This had drama. This reminded me of a lot of what you would see on TV, but there was action, there was fighting, there was drama, and what this did for the fans is this gave us insight to the boxing world and what we've been missing. We've gotten highlights from their very first fight, in which it was the best match in boxing that nobody really watched outside of Madison Square Garden, and it headlined, and it was a historic and epic encounter in 2022. So ultimately, I feel like this was placed well right below the Tyson bout, and I feel like this was meant to actually be a highlight of the show, and it didn't disappoint. I will say the referee, there was a lot of questioning on the refereeing of this one. Something did feel off during the match. I feel like, he was very quick to just kind of like not let them go at it, but also holding them very accountable with a lot of headbutts. But ultimately, just like the first encounter, the two of the best pound-for-pound women in boxing delivered a battle that thrilled the crowd. And just like their initial meeting, the result ended in controversy, though most of the crowd and also the statistics seemed to favor Serrano. All three judges scored it 95 to 91 in favor of Taylor. So close, but when you leave it in the judges' hands, it's not always in your fist to make the outcome happen. And that's what happened here. It left it in the judge's hands, and it took it right out of your hands and fist and your power of the punch. This is an amazing moment, again, for women's boxing, as they put on a show, Taylor said. But we put on a performance, again, for everybody. Just thank God for another amazing night. Fighting out of Dublin, Ireland. Taylor was coming off as a majority decision winner last month also. Serrano's coach mentioning in this fight that Katie Taylor is known for busting open her opponents with headbutts, and there's a long, long line of that. Let's get a quote from that side. "I knew it was going to be a little shady, but listen, I came here, I chose to be great," Serrano said. "I went up 3 divisions, I lost, I dared to be great tonight, I went up 3 divisions, I'm a featherweight champion of the world, and I want to be great." Serrano, 36, entered on a 5-fight winning streak after losing to Taylor in their first bout. In her previous outing, Serrano needed only 2 rounds to stop and overmatch Stevie Morgan in July. After spending time, she unified the women's featherweight champion. Serrano came in with a 47-3-1 record with 31 KOs, and Taylor came in with 24-1 record with 6 KOs. So we got a lot of training, a lot of things going on here, and ultimately, we do get some very, very just back and forth action. These 2-minute rounds worked very well in this fight, in my opinion. It did allow for a lot of back and forth action and a little bit of drama, but it didn't allow these ladies to slow down. Just when things were keeping going hot and heavy, that 2 minutes was up, and they were on to the next round of a 10-round fight. I prefer 2-minute rounds over the longer rounds just for that reason. It's fast, to the point, and that's what boxing needs to do to make sure, it can stay relevant and maybe even sneak in some audience and steal some of that away from the UFC. So, short, fast, meant to be the TikTok of fighting, and let's get this done. So, Taylor battled all the way back. Serrano landed 324 of 734 punches. That's a lot of swinging. While Taylor landed 217 of 529. The judges didn't reward Serrano for her activity that night. and the series is now in favor of Katie Taylor at 2-0. Both controversial wins that just might justify a third fight, and we might get a third fight ultimately in this one. But what else are we going to get? Well, the heavyweight fight is going to be up for grabs, as we got Mike Tyson ultimately winning by unanimous decision. In most of his fights, Mike Tyson usually wins within the first round or two, knocking people out. But this is an aged Mike Tyson. This is a Tyson that is a lot older. But does that power go away? And you got Jake Paul looking to be the young lion to knock him off the throat. Entrances were made. Jake Paul did defeat Tyson by unanimous decision in 8 rounds. Ultimately, the judges landed the score 80-72, 79-73, and 79-73. Very clearly, Jake Paul was the winner here. Tyson entered at 50-7 with 44 knockouts. Said it again, 44 knockouts in his career. He was the youngest heavyweight champion at age 20 in 1986. And he justified all 3 major belts as a champion. Ultimately, he lost to James Buster Douglas, as we all know. Paul entering 11-1 and 7 KOs, starting his boxing career in 2020, just a little under 5 years ago. With 6 consecutive victories, mostly against former MMA fighters. Paul's only loss came against Tommy Fury, one of the modern-day boxing attractions, that I will say does garner a little bit of activity in February 2023. But he has won 5 straight fights, including the decision over Tyson. They went through and battled in this one, back and forth. And I will say, ultimately, Tyson came out looking ready to just go at Paul. Paul kind of stayed back, kind of played with him, stayed back, and then once and for all, Jake Paul started going at Tyson, going, heavy, going hard, and then he seemed to slow down. I'll link the post-match comments from Jake Paul up here, but he admitted that he didn't want to hurt Tyson. He knew that he was slowing down a little in the match. He knew the match was over, and he knew that he was winning, so the last 30 seconds of the match, last few minutes of the match, he just said, I don't need to hurt somebody that doesn't need to be hurt. And actually, in the final 30 seconds, Jake Paul actually stayed way off of Tyson and actually kind of waved the hands like, hey, I'm stopping fighting, bowed down to him as the time ticked and the clock ran out, giving Tyson his dignity. I want to say, I think it was a very classy move by Jake Paul to do this. Nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to see their hero Mike Tyson getting knocked down and knocked out by Jake Paul. So, with that being said, the best situation was he could very clearly beat, even though it was by decision, beat Mike Tyson. And ultimately, then give him his respect, give him his dignity for what he's done for the boxing industry in the world. And he could walk away with a victory. And also, Mike can walk away knowing that he went 10 rounds at his older age. And he still can train for a fight the way he knows how to train. Guys, thank you. If you guys are in the channel, hit that like button. Leave a comment down below. Greatly helps out my channel. But let's get into the final thoughts. Final thoughts, again, are Mike Tyson has put boxing back on the map. Back on the map with being able to come out of retirement, train for a fight, build hype up, and then actually work with Jake Paul in the promotion of Tyson versus Paul. This carries into a lot of great opportunity for the boxing world to steal back maybe some fans and those viewers that went on to MMA and UFC many, many years ago. I always said boxing has struggled in many years since the UFC has really developed, and I would say they've even lost their fighters. There's a lot of young kids that would have trained for boxing because there was no other option, but now they've trained for MMA and now they move on. And the UFC has really capitalized on that and being a fight for all situations. Boxing is one of those age-old classic sports, but we need to be able to save it and preserve it somehow and not let it go extinct. And I think Mike Tyson came back to preserve boxing. I also believe that Jake Paul is great at preserving boxing through his promotions. And that partnership with Netflix saw numbers that you guys would never thought you would see on Netflix. And Netflix, speaking to them, surely did not expect these numbers because it crashed their whole system. I was blaming my cable provider, and then I realized it was my Netflix provider. So ultimately, it was not my internet that was causing issues like many of you guys. It was actually around the world. Netflix wants to get into the idea of justifying their next price increase to its users. And they got to start offering things like live sporting events. We've seen the NFL get in on that Christmas Day. We also seen Tyson and Paul. And that ultimately is going to be great if Netflix can handle this kind of magnitude. The next test for them will be in January 6th of 2025 when WWE Monday Night Raw goes to Netflix. And speaking of which, Logan Paul will be making his return on Monday Night Raw, Jake Paul's brother. And who knows, will Jake Paul be making an appearance as well now that he's chilled out and wrapped up from training for this fight? We could see Jake Paul on Monday Night Raw. Who knows? But guys, ultimately, those are my results and thoughts. Great for the future of boxing. Great that the Serrano-Taylor match was really the highlight. And shout out to the Barrios and Ramos match. That was also a good one to highlight young fighters. And I know I'll be watching if Netflix wants to put them on once again. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to head out.